Harry Beckwith, and I've only lived in town for about 3 or 4 years, but my mother's family come from here, and they've been around here for a little while. And I'm interviewing one of my oldest friends, Bill Waring, who's lived here almost all his life. We went through school together and whatnot, and I think you probably were out and interested in the natural order of things in this part of the world when you were very, very young, because your grandfather took you out and took you fishing and showed you nature and stuff like that. And that was perhaps the start?
Well, that was the start. My father wasn't so much interested, my grandfather was. Of course, he lived up on Hamilton Avenue, which we know is Boston Neck Road now. And I can remember from, you know, the time I was a toddler, seeing deer right in the yard,
Yeah.
fishing all, you know, with him all over, and he had that patience to show. He used to take me between Belleville, Shady Lee, Oak Hill Pond, which is now, you know, pretty well developed around. Well, most of the ponds are all developed around now. I guess the only one that isn't is Gilbert Stewart.
Yeah.
Fortunately, fortunately, between the large landowners and the Girl Scouts and some of those people, they've pretty well got that protected anyway. There's a lot can be done, a lot more can be done about protecting the wetlands and the natural beauty areas of the town.
Well, how do you think the town, I mean, when you and I were kids, nobody seemed to be concerned about any of this at all. If anything, people wanted to see more development and industry and anything that was, you know, anything that was bigger and better was good for the town. And, but that seems to certainly have changed now. And how do you see the town reacting to its natural spaces and its natural resources?
Well, I think you've got quite a number of town commissions now that are really aware of the situation, and along with the state, like we're in the process of a management plan. We've bought quite a number of acres for open space through, first it was John Chafee's Green Acres program, and then lately the Dupree administration for the mechanism for borrowing money for the open space. We've got all the land around Belleville Pond now, completely the pond, not Secret Lake, but the...
You know, is this some Charlie Gifford's land?
Yeah, we bought that. That was the last purchase that was completed about a year ago. At the same time, that was the monies that were from the state also. The town used to purchase the added land in Wilson Park, and also I think they've got some. They're going to, or rather, develop it, and they're going to develop the piece up on Fletcher Road. Well, we used to call Happy Road. It's Nike, an old Nike site. We're going to put some money into that also. And in the different individual neighborhoods around, they are, you know, preserving some of the lands. And any new developments now, for instance, we've got a development going across the street from Route 4 up to the Exeter line from Stony Lane, all the way back to 102. There's 180 houses going in over the course of the next 10 years up in there. But like out of the 154 acres, there'll probably be 35 or 40 of it devoted to open space. You know? One large chunk in particular, 120-acre piece, is open land. There's no wetland on it. And there's no wetland on any of that except at the entrances, both entrances. That's very small streams to cross. But other than that,
so in a way, you'd say that developer has been pretty reasonable.
Oh yes, most of the developers now, the Planning Commission and the zoning, they've got mechanisms where they can, if they don't like the type of or the style of a development, when a developer comes in to present them with the plans, why they change them, and they'll kind of persuade him to go in another direction. And they're not trying to stop the development, but to
Reach a compromise, a solution
Reach a
that
compromise,
pleases everyone more or less.
and to have to, you know, to protect the especially the wetlands. I mean, of course, the state is right on top of that too. So,
It's my impression there are a lot more people living down here, probably by virtue of Route 4, which let people commute, and Browning's shop, of course, has been a help, and also a lot of people, I think, just decided they want to get the hell out of the city.
yeah.
And, I mean, I didn't retire down here because I like cement.
No.
You know, but there are a lot more people, and yet it has seemed to me, being back here, maybe I'm just seeing things that you know, I'm not seeing it correctly, but it seems to me there's a hell of a lot of wildlife out in my backyard and around the cove, and some things that I never saw before. I never saw blue herons. Yes, I saw the egrets, but only the snowy. I never saw the common. I never saw wood duck. The kingfishers I finally saw. And you remember I told you I hadn't seen a kingfisher since I was a kid, and now I finally saw one.
I got a pair of them nesting down on the point.
And the crows, everywhere the crows.
Well, I don't know, but what
And
that's
the blackback gulls
yeah.
too. And I saw a turn. I bet there ain't many of them left around. Remember they used to nest hundreds of them out on the
old lighthouse.
Yeah.
We had an awful job and we want to go up there fishing. But I think a lot of the wildlife it has to do with the change in the climates too.
Mm-hmm.
You take the opossum.
Yeah.
You know, the mockingbird, there's another one. You know, their region is extended further north, but the herons were always here but in limited numbers.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
But now they may winter where they didn't before.
Yeah, right, very true. Right now there's probably more deer in town than there has been in a long time. Doug Ellsworth out in Sweet Lane had one munching on his flowers the other morning. I was going up to work right next to Gordon Chevrolet the other morning. One breezed by me at the light at Oakdale. Came right across the road about 5:30 in the morning, stopped, grabbed a few flowers on the bank there in that new shopping center, and then kept on going over the bank. You know, good thing it wasn't in the fall, but, you know.
But there does seem to be it has seemed to me that there's a lot around, and I'm just wondering if I'm being entirely too rosy about the whole thing.
Well, I don't know. I think, of course, the reason for the deer you're seeing them is because of the development. They're compacting in the small areas, like the area of that your aunt used to own. Hamilton Road, the old landfill.
Yeah.
You know, there's probably half a dozen in there. Richie Biles' land, of course, has always held deer, and there's plenty of them down there. You know, as is you know the area of Rome Point where the electric company owns. But as far as the herons and the different types of birds, I think they're being forced into areas. You know, there's so much development around that they're just forced into areas where where you can see them a lot easier. You know,
and they
come in contact with them, and they're beginning to tolerate it. Right.
Because I saw a blue heron right down, you know, right beside the dumpster crying, right in that brook, that tidal passage there.
Yeah.
Couldn't believe it. It was sitting there, presumably waiting for Wiki to throw something out.
Oh, sure, probably. I've never seen them down there, but the other herons, the white herons, the big one is now. It used to be called the
great egret.
The snowy egret. Now it's called the greater egret, the great American egret. They renamed a lot of birds, like the
Baltimore Oriole is no longer the Baltimore
No,
Oriole.
right. The English sparrow is the house sparrow.
Still a chicky importation, ought to be shot backwards.
Well, we used to do
My
that.
grandmother was
Remember in the
Audubon down here, and she bought traps particularly to get those buggers.
I remember seeing them
Then
up
she
in the
turned them over
barn.
to Clarence Van Hagen, who would take them God knows where. I don't know what he did with the birds, whether he turned them loose or whether he cooked them over.
Oh, shit. See, poor old, I can remember poor old Mrs. Thomas only died here a few years ago, you know. The lady,
Yeah, Mary Thomas.
Mary Thomas, yeah. She was 107.
Yeah.
But let's see, Hunter White's house was what, the next
This
one?
one.
This one. Oh, this is it, okay. Well, that was quite when Virginia and Mrs. Thomas used to, on 4th of July, they used to come out, the Confederate flag hung here and the American flag hung down there. Those were good old days.
My mother's outlived Black Mary, she called her.
Yeah.
And she said at one point, she never had much to say, but she said, well, she said, we always liked her sister Neely better, and she said Mary had a very selective memory.
Yeah.
Well, so, but you're the head of the Conservancy Commission.
Conservation Commission.
Conservation Commission in North Kingstown.
Right.
And basically,
30
what
years.
does that do?
Well, originally, the Conservation Commission was just, it was formed, each town...
It was mandated by the state?
It was mandated by the state, and each town was supposed to have them. Unfortunately, now, I think out of the 39 cities and towns, there's probably 32 to 35 still in existence. Some of the towns don't have them. But we've become very active here. We had a good program, an open space easement program that a lot of people could put their properties under and get a slight tax abatement. But it was, I think at the height of it, it was costing the town less than $2,000 a year. But then we got a tax assessor in at one point that wouldn't go along with the program, so we kind of lost it. And now it's, there's still a lot of people under it, but they've abandoned it so that they can get out and get into the State Open Space and Forest and Farm Act. It's basically the same program. So they can join that if they want. But we report, we're a regulatory, an advisory commission to the town council.
And you
all
also,
conservation
anything that
matters.
goes through coastal has
We
to
get
go
all
through
the
you.
applications for any coastal permit, DEM permits, or anything to do with wetlands, not anything to do with the septic system, that, unless it comes in conjunction with the wetlands.
Yeah. Yeah.
But other than that, we advise on all the anything from coastal. Now, of course, we're involved with the Narrow River, up in Narrow River, which is that part of North Kingston. But there's an awful lot going on in town, and an awful lot of plans. I think there's very, very little land in town that isn't under some type of a scrutiny to be developed, you know. It's a shame, but it's progress, I guess.
Well, Cranston is marching down the road to meet us. I said that once in front of Jim Taft, and he looked pained, and I said, well, I'm sorry, but...
The truth is the truth, you know. Well, look at, we've got a fellow who wants to put a mall in down at Saunderstown. Imagine those people are...
Well, there's going to be a lot of trouble, I think, over that.
Well, I mean, they've got a design that's somewhere out of, you know, going to look like the George Washington Bridge when they get through with this bridge crossing down here, if the bridge ever goes up. I got to admit that they are making progress compared to what they were a few years ago, but these fellows that are in there now are, they are working night and day, and there has been quite a bit of progress shown. But overall, I guess
Do you think there's as much hunting and fishing as there was, I mean, available, I don't mean people doing it, but available as there was when we were 18, 20?
No, nowhere near it.
How so?
The whole north end of North Kingston was closed to hunting several years ago. The south end, you've got, you know, just very few areas, and I won't get into the views on the chief of police, but apparently, you know, if there's a gunshot fired, well, he goes and takes the guns and then asks questions later, and you've got to defend your own rights to get your guns back from the limited episodes that I've seen happen. And most people get them back because he's got no leg to stand on. But where there's private property, as long as you get permission, like, you know, anywhere in the rest part of town.
But the stocks of game are still...
Well, the stocks of game are still here because of the game management policies. You've got more game management wildlife people in the state hired by DEM than ever before, and the way they've managed it, it's just like the western part of the state here. For years it was, the east of Route 3 was probably the most densely populated area in the United States. The west of Route 3 was one of the least densely populated areas. Out at our Rod and Gun Club, you know, we have tremendous deer hunting out there every year. And Mr. Flood owns land almost abutting ours out there, and we've had tremendous luck out there. And every year there seem to be more and more. I was out there last Sunday, and saw, evidence of a lot of small deer this year.
How about fishing?
Well, of course, the freshwater fishing is the same, and it's always been managed well with the stocking programs, but the saltwater fishing, the bass have come back real strong because of the restrictions put on them. Now you can't take a bass in this state. You can take one bass over 40 inches to sell, or you can take one over 28, between 28 and 40 inches if you want it for yourself for home consumption. But Massachusetts is going back to unlimited selling, so it's got to be over 36 inches, but it's still, it'll take its toll. And a lot of the states, after the 3 years of moratorium, they've all gone back. Maryland, of course, was the forerunner, and that was the big state because of the restrictions in the Chesapeake Bay. But bass have come back strong, and they've done a real good job of holding the fort and keeping the commercialization out of it. So, but it'll go back now, and I don't know, how long it'll last, but hopefully they can contain it and let just a limited amount of commercial fishing on it.
If you had all the money you wanted, and a governor and a legislators and town officials that would let you spend it any way you wanted to do with it, as long as it had to do with the natural environment, which includes everything alive in that environment, what would be your first priorities for North Kingstown? What would you do in the most perfect of all worlds, when you could do anything you want? What would you do?
You really open up a Pandora's box, don't you?
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff, but what would you think?
Well,
what would be the things you'd do first?
I think the important thing is you'd have to preserve the land. You'd have to, whatever lands are still available, you'd have to buy them. Okay. And along with the rights of ways. I'm not just for myself. I live right next door to. I've got a 5-foot right of way going down to the salt water, and I don't let anybody go out without telling them that that's a right of way. And there's so many people move in from out of town, and they want to close off either the right of way or the rights of other people's to access to the water. It's just not right. I think that provided they use it in a sensible manner, I think that everybody should have the right to see the beauty of the water and use fish or beach or whatever, clam. It's a shame that people think that way, but I suppose if you spend $300,000 or $400,000 for a house, you don't want people walking down beside it.
Yeah, well, a lot of people want privacy.
Yeah, but on the other hand, those right-of-ways were put there, 100 years ago or whatever. Sure, a lot of them were just for collecting seaweed for the farmers, but on the other hand, there's a lot of them there for other uses, for the use of the beach.
Yeah. Well, of course, most of the transportation was a lot easier in the early days by water than any other way.
Oh, yeah.
And so Tommy Pierce, I said to yes, I said, you're awful lucky because Colonel Babbitt, who owned the Cocomuscusic, hired David Sherman Baker as his lawyer when the town of North Kingstown wanted to run a bridge from the end of Pleasant Street across Cornelius Island and hop again over to the mainland. And I said, Babbitt was upset because he owned the old mill that's up by Nate Fuller's place.
Yeah, right.
And he also owned Cocomuscusic, and he was shipping stuff in and out, produce, all kinds of stuff all the time. And they put that bridge across. It wasn't going to be anything high enough or have a draw on it so that he could do that. And essentially what they were doing today, it's this sort of thing. They say, well, be deprived of all use of your property. So, and of course he hired David Baker. He screamed to hell over the cost to his own lawyer, and the lawyer said, look, we don't have to hire this bastard once. He said, what do you mean? He said, we hire Mr. Baker once. He's a local boy, everyone respects him, he's got control of everything down there. You hire him once, everyone thinks he's your lawyer from then on in. He said, you won't have to bother about it again because people will stop and say, Baker's his lawyer, we better not.
Is this the same?
So they were going to do that, and they stopped it.
I don't remember that, but
no, it was the 1870s.
But that must be the same Bakers that are now...
Yeah, Baker's Pond, that's how they got all that load. That's what you do, believe me. Yeah, come
Oh,
on,
yeah,
you're
I
a
know.
lawyer, that's how you make it. And then if you got any time left over, you go to the legislature.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh,
So the first thing you would do would be to get some sort of handle on land and access to it,
right, access to the water.
access to the water.
And land around the unique areas of town. I can't recall any right offhand, but there are several, you know, to preserve it for people, you know, for our future generations to be able to enjoy and see. You know, it's all going, and you know, I mean, I know those trees over there. I told you about the piece in back. Used to be Tingley's Farm over there, across the street from the high school.
Yeah.
They put those houses along Fairway, right up in back of that, all those ledges up in there.
Yep.
That plan's coming up before us this week to take a look at. And I don't know how they're going to put houses on top of ledges, but they'll manage somehow. Yeah.
They're probably going to be vibrating from everything going on down on Route 1.
Right.
Goes up and down the road.
Sure.
What else would you do? What would be your next move?
Yeah. I don't know, Larry.
Well, I guess maybe, you know, stop and think about maybe what you do on the commission. And certainly one of the things you do is to try where you can to get people to be reasonable about how the terms under which they hold their land, but then what else? So maybe that's just the whole answer.
Well,
The land and the access, public access to natural resources is the answer.
I think it is. There's no question about it. It's that would be the real priority. And you know, as I say, fortunately, we have been able to purchase some of the land through these open space grants that the state has come through with. So, the signs that are up along some of the roads here from the original purchase. I don't know where the present people got their information about the Department of Interior that's on those signs, but it wasn't so. It was when Shapey was governor, not when he was in Washington, that we got those Green Acres funds.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember it, because I remember people talking about putting land in under that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Made some sense. My aunt was thinking of doing that with her piece out on Shermantown Road and didn't.
That's right.
Didn't,
Yeah, well, you still got that out there, haven't you?
Yeah, and my notion with that is that, of course, the old Smiths are going to die on both sides of me. Mrs. Herbert, the old,
Okay.
and she wants to be buried out and back on her property. She'll want to be with her husband, so she says, or she prefers to be on her property, let's put it that way. So there's some of those gravestones that are on her land that are out and back there behind where the old church used to be. And then on the other side, of course, to the east is the Berry Farm, and those Smiths are not in a good way, and they won't be around too long. And, you know, there's that land all nice and flat, and I have a feeling that the grandson or nephew, whatever his grandson, I guess, the great-nephew, may very well, you know, after they're gone, just go out there with a ball of twine and some stakes, and the next thing you know. And of course, across the way is going to be a housing development. That's all in.
Well,
It's going to be a nice one.
That is, he's another one of the developers that.
Quail Hollow,
Yep.
whatever it is.
Mr. Cody.
Yeah.
He's had a track record of being very cooperative with the towns and doing, you know, well, it's like that. He's given the Savellas like 8 years to get all their nursery stock out of there.
Yeah.
As long as they keep just ahead of him, he doesn't care.
No,
So
why should he?
very cooperative, you know. And he's doing a nice job of the development of that, keeping nice large lots,
Yeah.
you know.
And they made him put a water line down. Initially, he wanted wells, and Roddy Smith said, no way. And the locals said, look, there's no way. With dry season, we're all using those wells. It goes down. If you put in those things, we'll have no water at all. So they ran a line along Common Hill, took it a bit further, and brought it back down. Shermantown. It'll go down to my property. And what I'm thinking, I don't know what I can afford when I get ready to go, but if there was any way I could do it, I'd love to deed that property to the town or the diocese, because they've got that little graveyard, it's gonna have houses all around it, and you deed the other property to the diocese, clear it out a little bit, but leave some trees and make it a nice public park. And you'll hear the fact that it's a public park and it and the graveyard are used will protect the graveyard.
Sure.
And it'll just be nice, and it'll be an amenity out there that will help keep that area a little bit more country.
Well, even,
I don't know.
be it to the diocese or the land conservancy,
Yeah.
something of that nature?
Something of that nature, but again, I said, I don't know what I'll be able to afford. I mean, I'm not doing anything with it. We may go out next year and take the Christmas tree off it.
Yeah.
That'd be about it.
That's right.
Every once in a while, I'm told, the federal government goes out there and digs mysterious holes and then goes away. And I don't know whether I've got a uranium mine or a secret missile silo they put in there without bothering to tell me, or what's going on there. But I'm told that by the neighbors, that they go in on my lot only, and they muck around and then go away. I don't know what it's about.
You're talking about the gray zones further down, the next property, the Smiths.
Yeah, the
Well,
west, you mean?
yeah, no,
Well,
going east.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Next to the berry farm.
Yep.
Rick Martin owned that for a while, and his sister Bee, and then now it's, the girl was married to Wickford. She knows, I can't think of her last name.
Oh, now Wickford's all up next to them now.
Yeah, but in the back of that property, now it's been let grow, the grass has grown over them, some real, probably the oldest gravestones in town. I don't know whether the historical zoning commission knows, or the cemetery commission or whatever. There was never any signs put up on those. But it's an ancient part of town, that's for sure.
Well, and untouched one too. Well, I guess I'm sort of questioned out,
Well,
but
I appreciate the chance to talk about the town a little bit.
well, I thought you
I've
were
been
the person who could do it best.
very interested in, it's all the time I've lived here all my life, and I just want to see that the town is, if it has to be developed, well, developed in an orderly manner and according to all the possible ways to preserve any of the natural beauty of the town.
It's a good thing we don't live much longer than we do, or we'd be awful disappointed.
I'm afraid so. That's for sure. I wouldn't want to be...
200 years, I think, would be more than I could bear.
Yeah, that's for sure. Well,
Well, I read back in these old accounts, and they're talking about, just walking down to be sure and picking up lobster, and they're talking about the amount of game that was around.
Oh, wow.
300 years ago, it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
And it's so far out of our own ken that we only know about it if we go and read about it. And so we don't see enough of it to see it, really.
It's true. It's true.
Well, thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
We're recording.
I'm Charles Daniel. I live at 68 Main Street, the Wickford House, and I teach at the University of Rhode Island, Fowler.
And I'm Violet Daniel. I live at the same place, and I've taught at North Kingstown High School for the last 20 years.
I'm Harry Beckwith. I've lived in town for 3 years. I'm a friend.
But you've been here a long time more than that.
Well, in the extended sense of up to 10 years. We're carpetbaggers who arrived here just during the Revolution.
Yes,
No update, no but none of that, but we...
was because see, we're known as new people because we've only been here for
We're known as new people.
Okay.
for 22 years, and that which is funny because I find out now that actually my family were the incorporators of Rehoboth, Massachusetts, so that we moved back to where our family actually came to, and that. So that what we thought we'd tell you about would be some of the first moments of when we came to Wickford and what it was like here.
When was
that time? Well, actually, I began to get a job at the University of Rhode Island in early August, and that
Of what year?
of 1967. And I say it that way because it's always sort of a step-by-step procedure. So that we tried to find places to live, and it was very difficult in those days. 2-year waiting lists at the university apartments and that kind of thing. And so we were looking at the newspapers and looking through Narragansett, and we saw a little bitty ad in the newspaper. And what did we do?
So we called the realtor and came up and...
Actually, we just missed the auction of that day, so that when everything was sold out of the Wickford House, we had come too late, actually. It was all locked up, closed. We peeked in the kitchen window.
And about the only window you could see in.
Yeah.
And went back to Albany and called the realtor and...
And we said, well, it was funny, it was in a phone booth by the side of a highway. It must have been 100 degrees. We could barely hear. And we think she said, well, maybe there is a chance that you could take a sublet on the house, and which is what we were interested in because we didn't know if we would stay. And
Was it empty, Davis?
It was
Priscilla Cheatham.
Priscilla Cheatham, and that so that we came down and looked at the house once again, and then I went back to Ohio State to do some professional work, and we got a phone call there about whether or not we had bought the Wickford House, and that my answer was, I thought, no, we hadn't really bought the Wickford House. We may buy the Wickford House. And I explained to them we were going to take a lease option, which meant we were paying basically the taxes. The next week in the Providence Journal there was a front page article with a picture of that house, sort of a mucky picture of the Wickford House, saying, 2 people found to buy Wickford House. Now you know right off that there's one fool born every day, but when you get 2 in the same day, that's exceptional. And I tell this story on ourselves to show what the sort of the change of mood has been between the last, say, 25 years or so and the way that the world is now. Anybody would buy one of those old houses. So the first thing I did when I came down, I laughed and joked, said, you know, this house would look great with vinyl siding. Almost everybody we met said, yeah, that's a good idea, why don't you do that? And I thought I was teasing. And then we met Mr. Bissell, one of the great fine gentlemen that I've ever known. And we came to find out that he was so happy that we had become involved with the Wickford House. What did he say, Philo?
He said, I don't have to walk like a drunken sailor anymore, because Pete was the first one who had bought a house down here at more than the price of, you know, a slum somewhere. And everybody, I think, had treated him as somebody who had more money than sense until then.
Philadelphia.
From Philadelphia. But
You gonna tell the real story? Who owned it?
belonged to Fenton Batten.
Fenton Batten.
Sure.
And when Pete and Ann came to town, they wanted to buy a colonial house. And I can't remember which realtor it was. I think it was Helen Gardner, maybe. And they said, we don't have a colonial house on the market. And the Bissells were really insistent they wanted to see one. So she called Fenton and said, you know, we got 2 people who want to buy a house. Fenton said, I don't want to move. And she said, we'll just put an absolutely outrageous price on it. But, you know, I feel obligated to show them the house. So Fenton put a price on the house. They came down, walked through, and said, wonderful, we'll take it. At which point, Fenton had to go to West Main and use the money to buy 2 houses on West Main to replace the one down here. But I think that the Bissells and us were sort of the beginning of a transition of age. That when we first came here, there were basically 2 kinds of people. There were renters, and then there were the last aged people who were living in their family home. And, you know, that has been a complete change.
Now, do you think the
20 years.
reason that you had such an aging native population or ownership population was that the children had left Wickford, the young people had left to try and make livings elsewhere because there was nothing to do here?
I don't know, I'm trying to think. Well, Mr. Hammond's son eventually came back. Mrs. Dawson and Addie Lynch lived around the corner. And,
He's never come
you know,
back, really.
Mrs. Chase.
Yeah.
And those kids were in town, but they weren't down here. and Betty Tabor, who's all the generations are back here
And
now.
Dolly Lewis came back.
Dolly Lewis came back.
But I think you're probably right, it was an in-between stage, wasn't it?
Yeah, you could spend the rest of your life humping baskets out of Ryan's, or you could
Going,
go
and,
elsewhere.
Go elsewhere, and then
But
most of them
isn't-
come back here for retirement.
Yeah.
but isn't our story sort of the same, that as teaching in the university, I taught in Colorado and Ohio and Tennessee, and there's no chance for me ever to go back to my own home of Columbia, Missouri, or there'll be a very accidental kind of thing. But I was reminded of that Ken and Belden, later Bishop Belden, a wonderful, wonderful human being, always referred to us as neighbors.
Okay.
And the reason we asked him about that one time, since we were new in town, and he said, well, but you're one of the very few people who actually own your own home in Wickford. He did, and a few others did, and it was sort of a rare kind of thing. And in that context, I think it shows what the Historic District Commission can do to help to rehabilitate a neighborhood, and that by '67 the houses had been saved by the Historic District Commission and its guidance under Mr. Wright and Derry Johnson, and others, so that there was a sort of new sense of confidence. And so you're quite right. Soon after we bought, there was a rapid turnover of people who then did make these one-family homes, and many of them are still living here like we have for the next 20, 25 years.
Of course, Rhode Island has had this notion that that commuting for more than 10 minutes is like going to the moon. So I imagine that was a problem. But then, as they started running Route 4, that spur off 95 now, that must have made this area more attractive. And then Brown and Sharp, and then Quonset must have all added to a little bit to the population pressure down here. And just the general notion of, I don't want to live in Cranston anymore, I'd like some more trees.
Yeah.
Well, no, Harry, I think one very interesting thing over the almost quarter century now we've been here, I have never ever been to any party anywhere in this village where business was discussed. People have such varied businesses. They're in such a large section state that, people talk about politics, they talk about how to refinish their house, what's the newest gizmo for doing whatever. But business isn't ever discussed, and I think that is because it is just such a diversified group of people.
Which in a classical sense makes them a community, because the community is Wickford, because this would be a meeting of social classes of fishermen and lawyers and old families and graduate students and renters, all mixing together and having as a common vehicle that living in a vibrant, living community, which is a very rare thing anymore. I bring my students from the university to things like the art festival, and they just are aghast at how friendly and nice it is, and this is a very special quality that it's almost been lost in a lot of places. I think you're quite right. Highways are intrusive to social identity. I have friends who still are upset about the end of the ferry boat that would go to Newport and back, which means that you'd have to wait an hour to go to Newport.
Yeah. Well, it meant that Jamestown was a lot pleasanter place to live, for one thing.
Jamestown was more pleasant, and we see just now as the new roads are coming into here, the intrusion. The first aspect we felt of that was the time when the Wickford community banded together in '72 over what some people felt was an unfortunate intrusion, which might actually more pollute the harbor. And it was sort of gratifying for me. This was called Concerned Citizens of Wickford, which was active for a few years. And that at a moment's call, you could literally get 100 people together to preserve what they thought was the integrity of their community, to protect what they thought might end up with more pollution and other aspects. And I don't know if you remember that a 1/4 mile long of heavy trucks full of 1,000 A rock was stopped by a few wives, Betty Tabor, my wife, Gil Thorpe, and my daughter Betty was one of them. Her hair was up in curlers, and they put their own strike on and stopped them to keep them from dumping into the bay. And
Harry, I think what is interesting, you were asking about, what made up the village that long ago. In the whole process of doing that, the neighborhood drew up a very, very detailed study of what would be the impact of putting a business at the end of the street. And when you understood what we had on the street in the neighborhood, Bill Sabo, who was a marine engineer, can't remember the people who since retired, who was an engineer from New York City Harbor, Bruce LeBlanc, who lived here, who had his chemical company, that we had every possible angle, from pollution to people who were counting the number of cars going out, to bankers who drew up the projected amount of business that would have to be generated in order to make it a prosperous. And that, I think, might almost be unique, to have a neighborhood that had that wide a diversity of expertise.
See, the last business I remember there was back in the 40s when the Belmos had a fish market out there.
Mm-hmm.
And that was as much a walk-in operation as it was a drive-in. It was a local fish market.
You would still have walk-ins at that point, sure. And, well, so I'm skipping that aspect of it, that kind of thing. One doesn't want to bring up
but it was a tiny thing. I mean, the whole operation was maybe twice the size of this room.
Mm-hmm.
And as I said, it was very, very local.
Mm-hmm. And that, but it was the idea of community
It was
joining together.
And a lot of people have always complained about, well, this village is very anti-business. That's not true.
No.
The village itself would not exist if the people down here didn't buy things in the local businesses and do not bother, where businesses are. They have encouraged and have enlarged the business district and done it in, I think, good taste and fitting with the rest of the neighborhood. And
well, this is something we covered yesterday, speaking with when Paul Wilson and Tom Pierce were here. And of course, Paul Wilson has Wilson's store, and so he knows that end of it pretty well. And I said, don't you feel that one hand washes the other, that this historic district has really turned out to be a boon to the business community? And I said, I come out on a horrible Sunday in February with the winds blasting around and freezing ice come pelting down. And I said, here are all these madmen walking up and down Brown Street buying teddy bears and sweatshirts. And I said, I don't get it, but I really at that point in the year, but I said, generally, I think, he said, oh yeah, he said, the historic district and the business district wash each other. He said, no question about it.
And I think everybody knows this, and when the issue's raised, I don't think anybody who knows what's going on. I think of Mrs. Sharp, the jewelry family.
Yeah, Brian.
And occasionally, Viola and I would make mistakes, and we would go out shopping someplace and couldn't find anybody. And we'd come to Sharp's Jewelry, and they would say, well, we can order that and have it for you in 2 days. And I thought to myself, if it isn't in Wickford, when someone in Wickford can't get it for you, you don't need it. And I'm sort of trying to maintain that principle of keeping my money in the town. Recently, we are looking for a replacement, a parchment replacement for a lamp. And we went to various places, and finally I went to the Ball and Claw, and they said, well, the lady that does these won't be in today. She'll be in tomorrow. And I thought to myself, yes, see, this village is priceless in that it does have almost everything that anyone needs or should want. And when you go out to some mall someplace and letting your money slip out of here, you should remind yourself that we're all in this community together. And I think that's a very important aspect, and to know that when you walk into the shops that you talk to is actually the manager owner and can give you service, and you don't find that
and it becomes such an end thing to have career education and consumer education. You get that growing up here. My daughter walked home from Wickford Grammar School and stopped at every store to talk to everybody to see what was going on, and that business was not a separate entity that you got in a car and drove to mall to. It were people you knew, that you dealt with every day and were friends with, and who could solve problems, could answer questions for you.
I think one of the other aspects is that this village does indeed face out toward the environment. We were talking about how it looks in, historic district businesses, but we're surrounded by almost a beautiful green belt.
Yeah.
Everyone in our communities had trouble with raccoons this year. Well, that almost makes it like it's in the 19th century, as if there still is a land environment around. We can see the egrets still that come in and feed, and that so that my daughter didn't have to go to some zoo or to go back to the farm. She could just look out at her world and see not only the world of lobsters and crabs and fishing boats, but also of New England landscape. And I think that's a priceless
That reminds me
kind
of one other thing that happened when we were first here, and I was teaching junior high in the north end of town. And for a writing assignment, I had decided, well, I would have them describe their neighborhood, and then they exchange papers and the people would get it, and they would draw what they had decided to see if they could describe well enough for someone to make a painting they could recognize.
That's a good idea.
Well, I found out that these were mostly Navy people, children.
These are nice kids.
They were very nice kids, but when they got ready to describe their neighborhood, they didn't have a neighborhood. I mean, they had what was in Grant's store on Post Road and the Navy base.
Their quarters.
None of them even had the Seacoast in. They would have the junior high, they'd have the grade school they went to, Grant's, the Navy base, and that's about it. And I thought, well, maybe there's, something wrong with this. So my daughter was second grade, maybe? First grade. And so when I came home, her friends, which were all the same age, must have been 4 or 5 kids around. And of course they were not writing well enough to write, but I said, draw your neighborhood. And they had Baptist church, and they had St. Paul's church, and they had the library, and they had the waterfront, and they had the town hall, and I think...
And they had grass, and they had water.
And they had trees, around, and the box houses and things, but even at the age of 5, the children in this village had a real sense of a community. They knew what buildings were where. They had grocery store, they had Wilson's put in as well as they could try to do it. They had the drugstore. Stevie's was still in business then, and they had drawn, pictures of what they thought Stevie's was. I think it's probably very important to the people who have grown up in this village to have that sense of a total world view from a very early age.
I think one of the other things, curiously enough, that's important is the sidewalks and the trees. And that our sidewalks are wide enough for people to actually walk on them. Modern people seem to put telephone posts in the middle of sidewalks. I don't fully understand that kind of thing.
Well, I think it's because the state, or whatever entity it is, tries to widen the road, and they end up grabbing the sidewalk.
Yeah, but we actually had sidewalks,
Yeah.
and then trees, and the Main Street Society, when I first came, was still planting trees.
Yep.
So I look out and see the trees that 20 years ago I planted. One of the days was a driving rainstorm, but after all, after you got wet the first tree, it didn't make any difference. And that, the Main Street Society, I think, planted, 4,000 trees eventually?
Well, because you see, they'd seen the hurricane. The chaos down here was...
But still, I'm looking right, I could look out these windows and see the 2 basswood here and the 2 basswood down. Those must be 120, 140 years old.
I know.
They must go back at least to the 1840s or 50s. So some of them didn't make it, not all of them died.
Not everything went down, and it may be that basswood has a different kind of root structure than the elms, which may work close to the surface.
I was noticing that but everything's coming back up, and so this is a wonderful place to walk in the fog in the evening, and I see people just jogging all the way around as if it's still a real community. So the water, the marshlands outside of Wickford are important. The trees and the sidewalks are important. The people who own the shops are important. And the mixing of classes and ages are important that have created something very special in Wickford. I think it's one of the reasons we have traffic problems on Brown Street. This is my private opinion. And that is that people like to at least be able to drive by and sees things in a human dimension.
Mm-hmm.
At least they're maybe too hesitant to get out and stop and park and talk to those kind of people, natives, but at least they like to drive by and see
I
that
think
still
it's
exists.
one of the few places, I can't remember how long ago it was, that Posey and Claude Dollar and Lucy LaFawn and, I can't think who else worked on it.
Well, you and me and
You and
others.
me,
Wickford beautification.
took up asphalt in Ryan's parking lot, and the town donated, the soil,
Oh, to put in
and
that.
to put in the parking, the little flower
Well,
beds
now
down
that's where
there.
those came from, now
Yeah.
you see.
They have been replaced, so that there's been a second generation.
But those are the first, we bought benches, which have all since disappeared, and we put in the cobblestones on the other side of
Which
the
are still
street,
there.
in between the street
We,
and the sidewalk.
I had a station wagon at that time when we go out to Slocum, and they would let me pick up the scraps of the grass. And so that's when the grass was put down in a lot of places as well. And this went on for several years, and it carries on in other forms. One of the funny things is if someone wants to look at Ryan's parking lot, there's a dead pine tree, just dead as a doornail.
Right there.
Right there in the corner, and right next to it is an elm. Now, when we planted the I think it's a blackjack pine, which is supposed to be resistant to salt water, well, it died. But right there was an elm tree, must not have been that wide. I thought, well, I should pull that up, that's an elm. That's a pretty elm now. If you notice that, after 25 years, and it's doing fine. And so that, you leave a sort of a legacy that on these kinds of things, and it would be fun sometimes to talk about the adventures of being on the Historic District Commission, which it was at times awfully exciting. But I would say that one of the things that has been fun is that if you do buy an old house, instantly you meet a whole new category of people. We would go knock on people's doors when we see that they were working on things, and we'd ask them how they were doing it, and that they would tell us the procedures and where to buy the stuff and what not to do. And then we would we repairing our house. Our house is like a clipper ship. It's under constant renovation. People say, when are you gonna renovate it?
It's an ongoing.
It's an ongoing thing. But then people would come in and watch us, and so you have a whole new relationship of friends who own old houses and are restoring them by themselves.
It's like having children.
It's like having children. That's right. And because you work on something, we worked on our front hallway for about 6 months, and we found that there were 22 distinguishable changes of colors on the paint of the banisters, and when we got it all off, the whole aesthetics of the hallway had changed because the sizes of everything had changed. We had a door dipped once and weighed the door beforehand, and then afterwards, and the difference in weight was 12 pounds. Can you imagine 12 pounds of paint on one door? And so that you learn all sorts of things about a house. And then, if we looked at the floor in this house and see how pretty it is, to mention somebody's probably gone down and hand sanded each of the little knots in the wood, so that and the knot curves upward, so you can feel the knot, and that's been hand sanded, and so that whole floors are finished, are seen as if they are pieces of furniture and such.
Let me ask a question, and you can each answer both halves of it, or either half of it you please. The first half of the question would be, what do you perceive as the greatest opportunity, and you can take that in any way you like, that North Kingstown may be looking at right now in terms of what you care about? And the other one is, what do you perceive to be the greatest threat that you see North Kingstown looking at right now? Again, in terms of what you believe is important to you as a resident.
You want me to go first?
Sure.
Well, I'll take the threat first.
Okay.
I think the greatest threat we have is that we have managed to keep so far Post Road, Route 2 businesses, all that kind of thing have been far enough away from down here that we've had a buffer zone so that we have been able to keep a business and residential community intact.
Yeah,
And my great fear is twofold. One, that large businesses will encroach upon the business of the village, so that, because I think this is we're going into a bad economic
yeah,
time.
well, the Providence complex does keep moving south, there's no question.
And, you know, that the local market, the local small dress shop, the local bookstore will not be able to compete, and that would be disastrous.
You destroy that sense of community as well as the physical community.
And the other real problem is intertwined with that, and that is I am really distressed by the number of homes that are for sale down here. That
We counted 10.
yeah, on this street there are 10 for
That's
sale.
right.
This is just like when we came.
And
That's so, I wonder
Count.
why. Do you think people got in and then the values dropped and they couldn't, or they lost their
or
jobs?
there people are afraid that the values are going to drop and they want to sell before they go any lower. There's all kinds of things.
Yeah.
You know,
Taxes have gone up 20-fold.
Some people are retiring and some are doing whatever, but it bothers me to see that part of, and as for the opportunity, if we can keep together a community like we have now, then I think we will be able to continue on a way of life that Providence Journal may laugh about and John Updike may laugh about, but those people who live here think is very important. And that is that my grandchild will be able to grow up in the same kind of community that is a true village.
Yep.
And my daughter lived in a village in Germany, and when she was 14, in a village in France when she was 16, with no problems whatsoever, because the village life is the same the world over. I mean, you know who the butcher is, and you're accustomed to going in and talking to the butcher and telling him your order, and he gets it back. And I think we have a great opportunity, if we all work together, to see that the outside forces do not intrude upon this village anymore, and that we can keep it the way it has been for hundreds of years.
Okay, then maybe in fact what you're telling me is that your opportunity and your threat are hand in glove.
They are.
Yeah. Makes sense.
I think the proposed renovations on 102 Phillip Street, where they're going to kind of cut down 200-year-old maple, and still retain sidewalks on one side of the street, but widen it, which means this whole street will be closed. But I think once you create that knife right through Wickford, that it's going to open up traffic to so much intrusion that each of the little blocks will become landlocked. I think the other real danger would be the low cost, low maintenance, low investment kind of stores that are being talked about in Saunderstown.
The factory outlet.
The factory outlets. I've been to those others, and there's no service. You got junior high school kids working in them. They, in comparison to the kinds of people that we have running nice businesses here in Wickford, I feel that might well just wipe them out as indeed any higher cost in taxes will threaten these businesses, and so that I am very pessimistic at this time. I thought that my wife identified things quite remarkably well. Now, some people hold on in an isolated way, but
the guts are cut out of.
When they do that, now there's because you see the institutions that preserved Wickford, Wickford Incorporated, the Historic District Commission, the Wickford Merchants
Association.
have no real defenses against giant $1 million types of businesses for intrusions, and so that whole people's lives may be radically changed within the next few years, and the results may not be for the better. We were chatting here as if Wickford were quaint, but it's this violent Dad used to say when she came here to watch one of our parades, he said, gee whiz, to create this for the movies would cost you millions of dollars.
Well, if it is quaint, it's only quaint because it's been destroyed in so many other places that it's unusual.
Well, I was going to say, we call it quaint, but actually it's one of the better ways to live. If your children
Now,
say
to say something else, since Les Flood is sitting here smiling. Our town's tricentennial has to be something that has not happened anywhere in a long, long time.
You talked about the one they had that Nicky Tarbox did?
Nicky Tarbox, Cynthia Carpenter, and
Les.
Tommy Pierce, and Les Flood, and me. And the wonderful thing was, and I think this is one reason we got such cooperation, the overhead for that entire operation was zero. Not one phone call, not one stamp, nothing. Everything was geared to, you gave to the town, and the response was just unbelievable. I mean, we had everything from, we had a parade of baby carriages and wagons one day. We had a pet show, we gave presents away. We had a play, an old Narragansett church. We got Quinessett Baptist to put on their revival that week. We had a huge costume dance. We had an incredible parade.
Oh, was that
We
the
had
one
fireworks.
Was that the costume?
No, it was
No, it was on the base.
It was actually on the base, probably the last usage
The
of it.
last time the base, I think, was ever used, but we had hangers and
Was
base.
what,
We had,
1,500 people there or something like that? I
all,
forgot.
all in costume. But it was, and everybody, well, the lights of the football field got paid for by the boosters selling things before it even got started. And every single organization in town that we asked voluntarily did whatever we asked of them to do, and everybody in town turned out for everything, and we made more money than we could ever have imagined. I mean, we were trying to make expenses, but yes, that we sold jewelry, we sold pendants, and we sold key rings,
Commemorative coins.
Yes.
silver and bronze, and they bedded in plastic.
And they auctioned off number one. Yeah.
I remember that, there was something
And-
in the paper about it.
And would the Cynthia Carpenter pull it
Yes,
off?
Cynthia.
And she put it
No,
back.
she,
No, and then the next one was Carl Dwarman
no, wait,
drew.
but Cynthia,
Drew
I
it,
think
and it's-
she picked her husband's name. She was the vice president, was supposed to do the drawing, and she reached in and picked a piece of paper up and drew it up, and it was Dick's name. And Cynthia said, "There's no way anyone's ever going to believe this," and put it back in.
And so they drew Carl Dwarman's, and Carl then gave it to the library, which is where it is. And that even when you won, you gave. And I think that kind of spirit still lies latent here, and we have to find some ways in the United States to use that kind of spirit.
It's on a sort of a retail basis now. I mean, you look at that clock shop that up at there, and I noticed this sundial, and a beautiful piece of work it is, and I discovered that Randolph Bullock had done that years and years and years ago, and he just sort of thought, well, it would be nice if they had it up there in that building, and he gave it to them to put up there.
Is that what that sundial?
He repainted it for them.
That's lovely.
Touched it all up and said, no, there, you put it up there.
Well, we had a person.
Well, Craig, that's how I got the sign borrowed from you, that when Tilly was cleaning up the house, he said, you should have this, it goes to your house, and brought it down and gave it to me.
We've had people come by and want to buy our Wickford House signs from us and take it. One man wanted to take it to Washington. I thought to myself, we don't own these things. We are stewards for them right now. This is the heritage of the community, and that we have been very fortunate to be endowed with this caretaker aspect, this steward aspect now. But things should be shared. And I think Mr. Bullock's example is a very nice example on that kind of
Well,
thing.
he's another example of a man who, he started out, he went to the Rhode Island School of Design. His family had been master builders here for at least 2 generations, and then he got working for Normanation. And he did a lot of, illustrations artwork for him. And I think through Isham's connections and on his own hook too, he managed to get down to the Metropolitan. And he became the curator at the Metropolitan and lived down in, I think, Brooklyn Heights or someplace like that for many years. And finally, he bought this house here just as the historic district was being created, had it built on that lot, and then retired. They retired back here. So there's a man who went away.
And has now returned again.
Has returned, yeah.
Well, I just think it's so
Very nice.
So I
important.
was thinking Mary Wickford is very much the same kind of story.
I grew up with Biddy, and she's a
No, her
nice,
mother.
nice person. Oh, okay.
You know, that her mother married and went to New York,
Mhm.
and then came back and lived the end of her life here, and was one of the people most instrumental in getting the historic district.
She was
started.
always involved in civic things, and you look at any listings, and there it always is Mrs. E. Knight,
Mhm.
right there, everything.
So there was always a tradition
Yeah.
of service. We should talk about the Greens as well, and some rather fine families that have had a marvelous sense of communal obligation. And we represent a transitionary form, and what the conversation's been about is that we hope that the next generation will be able to be wiser and take care of our air and water and bay and the herons, and be able to save a remnant of an essential aspect of civilization.
Now, I got it in on, what was your threat and what was your opportunity?
Oh,
I got it in on, if you can just
I
put
think
it down to a sentence.
I think our real opportunity right now is one of the things that a group of people are doing, which is Wickford Incorporated, which is to put on a more firm basis a possibility for communal discussion and communal communication with business community and with the homeowners and the group that's in cooperation with the Historic District Commission. After all, the Historic District Commission is not everything to everybody. It is a group of people that are doing the best they can to preserve the outside exteriors of buildings. Now, if you can preserve that, then maybe it's up to all of us to preserve the inner spiritual qualities of a good community. I think that's our real best opportunity at this time, and that having a group as it's doing now with a sense of common sense that, but that's not too narrow either, where they can talk about Saunderstown and talk about water quality and air quality as an essential part of our whole life, and not dependent on Pettaquamsett or Cocumscussock historical societies. Those are different things
They
too.
have their own focus.
They have their own focus, and one of the real weaknesses that we've had is that we haven't had a community group such as that Shore Acres has had, but of course those are difficult to maintain in this decade too.
Well, Shore Acres is a peninsula, and it has its own isolation with one way in and out, thank God, although some damn fool wanted to run a road down the old railroad line. They thought that would be a nice idea, have two ways in. But it has that, Steamboat Avenue is it, and while a number of those houses I used to go through in hip boots, I wouldn't want a house in there still. It is isolated, and that is what has protected it, is the water all around it and the one way in.
And Route 4 coming right through now makes it possible for an absolute intrusion within 5 or 10 minutes, and I'm sure this is one of the reasons, what does that mean? There are too many petty thefts in this area now. There's too much robbery going on, and this is very divisive things. And they've hit, almost every business store has been hit.
This is true.
And
this is
that
true.
This injures those stores which don't have a great margin, and I think this is a very great danger.
Well, I imagine whether you come down here to buy or come down here to shop, if you might as well do it where you've got a few amenities.
Well, that's the point, yeah.
You know.
And to feel good, if I'm bored and want to feel better, I just go down and go into some of the stores.
Oh, yeah, I mean, I find doing a shopping here is far different from in Providence. I allow twice the amount of time I know I need to do what I have to do, because I know I'm going to be talking to a lot of people. It's as much a social function as it is...
Cynthia Carpenter had a wonderful phrase about that concerning Ryan's meat counter. And everyone in Ryan's was very pleased with the comment, but don't remember what it was. But what it comes down to is that when we walk downtown to buy something, it almost often takes us a whole hour to walk downtown. From our house. It's about 3 minutes. But we have a good time if you can take a whole hour talking to people and seeing people. And this is why we like the Wickford Art Festival. We get to see and talk to people. And that's a precious commodity anymore.
Well, just coming down here today, I've received all sorts of valuable information, some of it distressing, some of it pleasant. And I've got to get out and deal with it eventually. But that's how you hear things. You learn about things. So, well, I want to thank you both very, very much.
Well, it's good to see you. I don't see you often enough, and we've both been working, and so thank you very much for inviting us. I think your series can be a great help.
Well, you're part of that history now. You're going to be up in the library on videotapes. It'll be all on.
Well, invite us in the wintertime when we wear suits and pinstripe jackets and that kind of stuff.
No, I mean, this is going on.
I know.
My name is Richard Carpenter, and we are doing an interview this morning being July 21st, 1990 of Randolph Bullock for the Historic Wickford Oral History Project. We're standing right now in front of Mr. Bullock's home at 92 Pleasant Street. Mr. Bullock, can you tell us how long you have lived here in Wickford, off and on?
Well, off and on. I was born in Newport, but I didn't live here a long period of time. The teens. We had been up on a farm. My father had owned up in the South Situate. And when my grandfather died, couldn't be run by my grandma, so we had to leave the area up and sell the property and come down here and take over this property.
Let me shut it off now. So did you move in across?
Very good. I lived here from the 1918, right around there, and until 1927 when I went to New York.
And how long were you in New York?
40 years, working at the Metropolitan Musuem of Art, where I became curator of arms and armor. But when I came back, the piece of property across the way had belonged to my father. He had used it as a garden for vegetables, and he had given it to me. He died in 1947. I gradually developed an idea for a plan, and the plan was okayed by my wife, and so we sort of drew just what we wanted, using all the furniture we had, a place for everything. So when the movers came up, they found it most extraordinary. We had a place for everything. And since then, we've purchased a piece of property in back of us on Fowler Street, and had developed it so that we now have the A&M landscapers doing our landscaping for us. And they trim trees and bushes and everything. It's really wonderful.
Didn't you tell me that the lot behind you, between the back of the house and Fowler Street, was at one time some sort of a tidal pool and part of the...
It was a large saltwater pond there. And that was before the 1938 hurricane, when it became necessary to lift the level of Fowler Street about 3.5 to 4 feet. And you can notice that if you go along Fowler Street and see all the adjacent houses, the land immediately around them, about 12 or 15 feet from the street, are much lower than the street.
All right, let me swing around and get a picture of this house that you and your wife built and moved into. It's right across from the street you were raised, and there it is, with the beautiful birch in front.
Dave's not happy with him out here in his alley.
Great.
No,
Okay, you're back on.
Now, Randolph, you had some association with the small house behind this house, too,
yeah,
didn't you?
the house, little house directly behind this.
Okay, why don't we just move down there?
Yeah,
We
we have another section, a story higher.
Okay, we're videoing.
Okay?
Now, that's the little house you're talking about.
That's right. Now, it used to be a barn, a stable. And it used to have place for 2 carriages and 2 horses. And when the 1930 hurricane came, my father had already developed it for a place to keep his Model T Ford, which is one of the first ones he had. And I think he only had one other, and he died in '47, so it wasn't too bad. And he changed it over into a carpenter shop. And long before then, just before the turn of the century, his father and his grandfather were busy building what is now or was the first library here in town.
Is that the one now where the Chamber of Commerce is?
Where the Chamber of Commerce is now. And there was a door, they ordered a door and it never came. So they had to order another one, and it came and was installed. Presently, the originally ordered one came, and my father stored it in the basement of the old house. And just before the hurricane, he said, I'm going to get this out of here. It's been here for years. So he put it in the basement of that, and it was taken away by the hurricane.
Now, Randolph, do you remember were you here after the '38 hurricane?
Yes.
Do you remember how high up the laneway the water came?
I wasn't here during the hurricane. I was here two weeks later, I think. And the water came up almost up to the level of here. In fact, I think something maybe splashed over. But it rained steadily for nearly 2 weeks before. So when the elm trees were hit by the breeze, it was so wet at the base that the eye of the hurricane passed over us, and it took the tree, the wind was blowing that way, and then the wind changed like this way, and it tore the elm trees right out of the front.
Now, were there elm trees in this lane?
No elm trees here. As far as I know, there are only maple trees in this area. But I don't remember too many. I don't think we have any. The lane now is actually a street named S-E-A, C Street. And it has, it used to go to the beach. You could step down off a very low wall onto the sand.
Wait a minute, start over. The level what?
The level of the street was down close to the level of that depression there.
Oh.
Because when they rebuilt this portion of the building, they had to put a wall here because otherwise wouldn't have an exit there. And that leads the water that falls off the roof and so on into the sea. And that's why that wall goes along that way. And I lived in this building for a short while. And while I was here, it was after the hurricane, I planted this tree, thinking that if we had another hurricane, it wouldn't bring the debris from the hurricane up the street so far. An awful lot in this area. And you see on our right here, there was a little wharf that went out like that and came back in that way. And about here, there was a little low wall, and the sand shore came way up to that wall. And the difference between the wall and the sand was about this, and it just slanted off like this. Somewhere I have a picture of my father unloading a load of fish from a boat down on the sand, looking up this way. I think this shows the building here, house.
What was your father's career? What was his employment?
He was a carpenter and builder.
Okay.
And you see, he was a carpenter and builder, and he lived in this house. And the building was in our possession, Bullock possession, from 1843 until, when did you buy the?
1971.
1971, when my sister sold it. She could no longer give upkeep on it. But when the hurricane came, destroyed all that. And
Did it pull the wall down?
there was a very little, this wall, it wasn't here.
Mm-hmm.
So that didn't have to, but some of this wall was destroyed. And you see, there was another section as big as that, out that way, almost to the wall. And I had a canoe there was a piazza on the house. And I had a canoe there. And that went with a hurricane. And this portion of the building fell over that way, hitting the porch on the other building.
Oh, I see.
Not that far.
Did, now the 54 hurricane damaged this place quite extensively too, didn't it?
A little, but I don't remember too much about that. I was here then, and I think it was, the basement was pretty well destroyed. And I remember after it, I came out and took a timber of something, where it was from, I don't know, and just propped it under the corner of the building. And the carpenter, when he looked at it, he said, "Who did this? This was skillful." I said, "Well, I did it. I didn't have anything to cut. I just jammed it under." He says, "You saved the building." So this was my sister, and I think my mother, lived in here with us for about, I don't remember the details of that, but we put that little porch on there and planted these 2 trees. And this is really messy now. You got to be careful.
Yes, very, very rough through here.
So you see, when they established this, see, already they didn't plan it too well. But this is superior to what it used to be. See where you could step off. Where you could step off on the was right up against the building, the little building that is here. And that would be just about here. You could step down onto the sand. There's so much. See, there's this old timber from the boat.
Right.
That timber was dug up. Last thing we ever did on the beach was have a clam bake with Bob Major. He used to live down below here. He was our best man.
We're recording. Go ahead.
Now, can you see that?
The dock? Sure.
Yeah. Now that dock is the acid walk. One of the many docks that must have been along here, because this street used to be called Main Street. And it was a main street because most of the business was sea-dwelling people. People who had needed docking space when they came in with fish. In other words, this was the business portion of the town. And it, the far beyond the acid walk, there's a sand shore. And that's where the Baptists used to baptize their members. We can see that when we're down there at the main dock.
This little spit of land coming out right here from Pleasant Street, is that what we call Acid Wharf?
That's the
Okay,
Acid.
that's the Acid Wharf. And there used to be a dock on there, I guess, huh?
Oh, a lot of buildings on it.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, there's quite a number of buildings on it. And there's a road down on it from Main Street to this street, which is called Main Street. And this is C Street.
Okay. Okay.
There's dozens and dozens of what they call right-of-ways to the beach throughout the town. There's one I know of that is completely ignored. It appears on the plot plan, but it doesn't appear if you try to find it up there. It's not right beyond Hall Street. Someone has decided it is theirs, and they have lawns there, and right side of it is a tennis court. You know where that is?
I know where it is, right?
This is the end of Pleasant Street, jutting out into Mill Cove, which goes up to the south, no, north, I'm sorry, to the north, where there used to be a mill. And that mill has been destroyed since.
That was the Torgee Tide Mill.
That's right, the Tide Mill.
Now, there's a plaque here. There it is. It shows the water level for the hurricane.
I don't see it.
Around the corner. That's over there.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, right there. What did they do in this building?
Now, to our left is Mill Cove, and the rest of that is the bay. And it was after the 1938 hurricane that the breakwater was put in. After the 1938 hurricane. And you see, this is the end of what was the business section off to the right. Wharves and all sorts of things. Most of them don't exist anymore.
That's right.
You can't even find their remnants. Oh,
What they use the building for here?
I don't know what they use for the oyster factory. The oyster shells were packed here on the ground, and they shelled them all and sold the oysters and collected the shells, because they could break the shells up and use them for the way they use this now. It's stuff on the ground.
Now, I've heard that shelling oysters and shucking oysters was a very social affair. That a lot of young people here in town would come down in the evenings after doing regular work and shuck oysters and make something like a penny a quart or some wonderful amount like that.
An awful lot had to be done, depending particularly on how much they got during the day. Draining for, dragging for oysters.
Now, at one point, I've also heard that the people who later ran Johnson's Hummocks in Providence ran clam banks down here. Do you recall that?
I've heard of it, but not in any detail.
That was not when you were. That was when you were in New York.
I think so. Yeah.
Now, this isn't the only enterprise at this end of the street, or was it?
No, I don't think so.
There was another oyster house across the.
Across the way, and this island across here is called Cornelius Island,
Right.
and they used to have some of the work that they did later on the acid walk. They used to do it over here. But I think
They clean their nets over there.
yeah, they clean the nets.
That was also
Put 'em
a
up.
farm at one point, was it? Was that ever a farm? I've heard it was a farm and a family
don't-
lived out there.
I don't know. It may have been. I think someone lived there, but I've never heard the details. A lot of it I haven't read, and now I can't read.
Did your family farm this area as well? Or were there no, or was that just a
I don't think so, because my family, the men were always south of the
why don't we walk over and, why don't we wait to get this going?
Go ahead.
Okay, go ahead.
All right?
Yep.
Yep.
That is, much of that is the original building. And the back of it, way out this way, they packed the shells. And every summer, they had to take the shells and take them out, many of them, take them out and empty them on the the oyster beds. So they had some place to grow out of the young oysters.
What is now the Pleasant Street Marina, that was an oyster house too?
That was an oyster house, but not now. I don't know what it is.
It's a marina and boatyard now.
A marina boatyard, right?
Now there were two different names. This one was Beacon Oyster, wasn't it?
One was Beacon, and I don't remember the name of the other one. Yeah. Now to check anything, I have great difficulty. To get someone else to check. And this never used to be used as a parking lot.
That was just used for shell storage?
It was filled with shells back, and their equipment was very old. Can be a little closer.
Okay.
Did you get the whole tour here?
Can you see the whole shore there?
Yep.
And then all those, most of those stone walls have been rebuilt to a degree. And
Go ahead, you point down there and what you see.
here's the acid wall. Here's the sand shore where the Baptists used to baptize their members. And then beyond there, sticking out in the water, is the acid wall.
All right.
And then, if you look carefully, you'll see the little building that at the bottom of C Street.
Yeah.
You see there's a big building there against the tree, right at the beginning of the wall.
Yeah.
And right side of it, low down, is the building that was so badly damaged at the bottom of C Street.
Mm-hmm.
And what was the gray building with the red stripe across the top of it over there that's closer to us than C Street? Next,
The big one.
this side, I guess it was Mrs. Burdick's property.
Oh, I can't see the, oh yeah, the red thing, that's right. That's that building on the corner.
Okay. What was that? Was that another carriage house?
I think that was what they call the boathouse.
Okay.
But I don't know whether there's any boat in it or not, anytime. But from here you can also see the, or is it too high tide? You can see the
Breakwater?
breakwater.
Oh yeah, I see it.
You see it?
Sure. See the breakwater and over to Quonset Point,
That's right.
where the ships are.
And the ships are there, have been there for over a year. What is it?
The gas carriers, natural gas carriers.
Some of this modern stuff I don't know, but the old stuff hangs in my hair.
Now this pier has always been devoted to fishing, is that correct?
Yeah, this used to have buildings on it, but they were destroyed.
The
Other side, get over there.
why don't we just run? That's why we walk across the.
At the base of Main Street, there was a long scale in the ground. And there was someone here to weigh the vehicle that was going to take the coal before it went in to get the coal. Then they went to cut the coal, and on the way out, weighed again, and the difference was the amount of coal they had.
And this coal was what people would come to buy for their homes after heat.
A great many of it was, yeah. Homes or small businesses or whatever. But way down, now I don't know that I can locate it exactly, but when we get down there, I'll point out the place where I believe the first two timbers put up and leaning over slightly over the water, the end of the wall. And then when the coal came in on a barge, they'd lift it up, swing it around, and dump it in the coal storage. These properties were, when they were originally built, they were built right on the property line, so that when their vehicle could be driven up in front of the house, if the snowstorm had filled in the area, they'd only have to clear the place from the house to the car to get into it. And they wouldn't do it in the house, they'd have someone else do it. The same way who was keeping the vehicles and the horses and so on. There were dozens of barns around about. One of them was up part of what is now the Wickford House. And so
What?
the coal was over toward that side of the, I think they've enlarged this parking, so I don't know exactly where it was, but one of the supporting things that lifted the coal out of the barges was over there. And then directly across the way, I don't know where this was either, but I think it was near that big building there was another one. And that was control the coal that was used by the general, the boat that used to come in here, and also by the branch line that came down from Wickford Junction, and the steam engine.
And the connection was that people would meet the boat here and then take it to Newport, is that correct?
That's right. They would come all the way from New York on the train, get off at Wickford Junction, get on the little branch line, come down here, get on the boat. It was a beautiful ride over to Newport.
Mm-hmm.
And that boat was on time. You could set your watch by it. 8 o'clock it would come in every morning and land at the dock. And I was born in Newport, so I felt as though I had to go back every once in a while. Though I had no control over it then, I was all right. And it was the third one, like this coal supply, was up on Phillip Street. Although the area on Phillip Street where it was is now part of the parking lot in back of the Earnshaws.
Okay. I'm looking over in that direction now. It's further around. You can't see around the point, but you see how the harbor goes in there.
Yeah.
So there were 3 places in town where they used...
places that I know of that supplied coal, and each of them, 2 of them I should say, were supplying coal to the engines of the steam engine railroad. And the other one was this one for all those who needed coal but had nothing to do with the steam engine. The old railroad used to come down from here. It was connected with the Seaview Railroad. On the other side, I just cannot remember where the name Franklin came from, but it may have been the name of the person who owned the property through which they had to come. It may have been that. Anyway, that sounds like a possibility.
Why don't we hold this thing? Let's truck it.
let me take this picture up here of where the end of Franklin Street and coming down the dock and overlooking here the water.
It was right in this area somewhere. Now, it may have been that they had to park coal. It may have been
Let me just go back here.
Phillip Street, Franklin Street. And it was here that there was another one of those, what did you call them?
They call them coal tipples.
Coal tipples. The barges would come in here, you see, in high water, and be unloaded, and then loaded onto the car.
Pieces of concrete, are they associated with the coal operation or the railroad?
I don't think so. Because that concrete like that is too late. It may have been enclosing the area that originally was, but I don't. A lot of this I haven't been able to pursue. I just became interested in other three. Someone was asking me about pursuit of it.
So we had one coal delivery that was up at the town dock.
Yeah.
It seemed to be sort of a general delivery. This
delivery.
was general delivery, or did this service what at the mill over here?
No, this is for the mill almost completely, as far as I know, unless they said, well, I'll give you a ton, or whatever.
And the Seaview Railroad took the coal over to the mill, huh?
Seaview Railroad went down past here. They built, what are those called?
Aqueduct trestles.
Checkles?
Trestles.
Trestle, or other, anyway. They were built across Academy Cove and across this other cove on the other side of Fowler Street. And then the trucks would come in and back down this extension, fill up with coal, go back on the main line, and go down to Hamilton, where the unit that supplied the extra electricity that couldn't come all the way from Providence. And that's why it was used here.
So it was as much for the Seaview as it was then for the Union Mill over here.
No, I didn't know that it was for the Union Mill.
Okay, then.
It may have been.
Okay, so this was the coal supply then for the Seaview.
So for the Seaview, I think they ran the extension. So that was it may have been used again. They may have had a weighing device here. I don't know.
Why don't we start with the church?
Can you get it all in there?
Yes, sir. Well, except the steeple. We can see the whole side and the front.
Can't see the steeple from there, can you?
No, that's the only part I can't see, but I'll do that later from the front.
It's impossible. There are only 3 windows in that when they first built it.
Only 3?
Far one was added in the second half of the last century.
Now, this is the Baptist church, which was built when?
In 1816. And it was built as a meeting house, not as a Baptist church. And it wasn't until 1834 that a church body was formed from members from the Allenton church. Now, you ready? Everything is the building is the way it looked, except originally it only had 3 windows, and the last one, 12 feet of church was added. And can you see this wall here?
Yes.
That wall went all the way down to the end of the church. There was no basement. No basement at all. And during its construction of less than 10 years ago, they extended it down, built under it a meeting house, fellowship hall. And this wall, the wall was built to duplicate the wall that was already there for a short distance down from the building. And the man who did it, I can't remember his name, but he was excellent at it. And there are 3 entrances on the lower level on this side and 1 on the end. On the other side of the building, there's no excavation at all at that side. The level of the ground is way up where it was.
When you say this was built as a meeting house, Was it built by a Baptist-based group, or was it built by the town, or was it built by the community?
It was built by the Wickford Baptist Society, which is a different organization completely.
I see.
Than the Wickford Baptist. And the little addition on the end is new construction, which was done same time the walls were up.
And this church's parents then would be the Allentown Church down near Tarbox Motors?
As far as the membership is concerned.
Mm-hmm.
Because it was built upon their original desire to come into town.
I see.
And the belfry has been very much questioned as to how it was built, but the records say that it was added after the church was built, set up on top. And anyway, there are evidence of it that way and evidence of it the other way. So